Hey, it's Brian Manning, political asylum lawyer. My law firm's based in Houston, Texas, but we help people all over the country to secure their future in the United States through asylum. So today I want to go over something with you real quick, and then I'm going to take a few of your questions and answer them for you about asylum in the United States. So here's what I want to talk about briefly first. Go ahead though and start leaving your questions in the comments. Both we're on TikTok and YouTube and Facebook live right now. So go ahead and leave your comments on one of those places, your questions, and I'll get to them in just a minute. And tell me where you're at, by the way. Tell me where you're watching from. Also, I'm curious to hear what country you're from, who we've got represented with us live today. I always love to hear where you're from and where you're at now. So let me know in the comments and ask your questions. So again, Brian Manning, political asylum lawyer. I help people all over the country to secure their future in the United States through asylum. So here's what I wanted to briefly discuss with you. Anything else to add, or anything else you think I should know? Anything else you want to talk about? You're going to get a question like that at the end of your interview or near the end. This question is usually asked in your affirmative asylum interview, almost at the very end, usually right before what they call the security questions or the bar questions, when they basically ask you, are you a terrorist or criminal in 20 different ways? So before that, after they've asked you all the questions that they want to ask you, they're going to say something like, okay, thanks. Is there anything else you want me to know about or anything else you want to tell me? Why do they do that? Well, you'll recall at this point in your interview that in the interview near the beginning, they're going to say something like, okay, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions and you're going to answer them. Then at the end, I'll give you a chance to tell me anything else that you want me to know that we haven't yet discussed. And the reason that they do that is because they have to give you this chance, right, to sort of get on the record, get out there anything that you think is important, because they don't just let you talk during the interview. They don't just sort of let you tell them what you think is important. Rather, they ask you question after question after question. They cut you off. They change topics frequently. They make it really difficult, okay? But they at least have to sort of act like, oh, well, no, the applicant got his chance to say what he wanted to say. We gave her the opportunity to tell us whatever she wanted to say. Now, it doesn't help that much when this comes at the almost very tail end of what's probably been a grueling interview where you're exhausted by this point. You're worn down from the questioning, and maybe it's even been an acrimonious, sort of hostile interview. And so for them to just say at the end, hey, you want to say anything else, is not really quite as helpful as it may seem at first. But in any event, you have to decide how to answer it, right? Okay. And when I was an asylum officer, I saw people answer this question in very different ways. Okay. Some more helpful than others. So I want to share with you today, from my perspective of being a former asylum officer, someone who's done thousands of immigration interviews, and now I'm an asylum lawyer, so I'm still seeing this all the time as a lawyer. I want to share with you what I think are the best ways to handle this question. Okay. So first of all, here's what not to say. Don't just start begging the officer for asylum. Okay. I've seen people use this as the opportunity to just start saying, oh, please give me asylum. Please. I promise you, if you just give me asylum, you'll never regret it because I'm going to be a great asylee and a great permanent resident and a great U.S. citizen. I'm the kind of person you want in this country. Or I've seen people say things like, America is the best country in the world. Thank you so much for allowing me to even have this interview. And I know you're going to show your grace and mercy to me because America is the great bastion of hope and freedom-loving people everywhere. I love the United States. Thank you so much for your time. And sometimes they'll get very personal and say, officer, you seem like a great person. And I know that you're going to find it in your heart to see things my way and to recognize what I've been through and see that I'm someone who should be here with asylum. None of that is helpful. Okay. Here's the thing. At this point in the interview, the officer is already tired. They're tired of asking you questions because, again, this comes near the end. And remember, asylum interviews are usually pretty long. They're usually something like 2 to 4 hours long. And so at this point, the officer's tired of typing, taking notes from what you're saying. They're tired of thinking how to formulate questions to ask you. They're stressed out by thinking about all the work they have to do for your case after the interview, and they just want to get it over with. Okay. And this brings me to something that's really important that you be thinking about at all stages, from the very beginning, when you start to put your case together, and you're working on your application materials, and then as you're preparing for it, and then at the interview, you need to be thinking, how can I make the officer's life as easy as possible? Okay. You want to give them a roadmap to get to the answer yes in your case in the easiest way possible. And you want to make it easy on them. Okay. You want to make everything easy on them, because when people like you and they like your case and they like their interaction with your case and you've made their life easy, they're more likely to give you asylum. That's the way it is. It shouldn't be that way. Every case should be uh, analyzed objectively under set criteria and applied evenly, but that's just not how life works. All right. Where asylum officers are human beings, they're influenced by the same things that you and I are influenced by, which includes your mood at the time. Okay. And they're not in a good mood usually by the end of the interview with you. They're tired and they just want to get it over with. So when you start talking about America is so great, or, oh, I deserve asylum so bad, um, that kind of thing, first of all, it's just not really relevant to the analysis. Okay. You're not telling them something that they're going to use in when they write up their assessment after the interview and they're deciding whether to give you asylum or not. Those kinds of things that I was giving you examples of aren't something that comes into the analysis at all. It's completely irrelevant. They're just thinking, when this is going on, they're just thinking, this is worthless. This is not helping me make my decision. And therefore it's just annoying. Okay. And you don't want to annoy them. You don't want to annoy them. All right. So, don't do that sort of thing. Okay. So the question then becomes, well, when do you say something, or what should you say? You got to say something. One option is just to say, nope, nothing to add, officer. That's one option. Okay. And that's perfectly fine. And in fact, much of the time, that's the best thing to say. But when will you want to add something? In what scenario should you say, actually, yes, officer, I'd like to say something else? Well, okay, if there's something that you haven't yet talked about during the asylum interview that is directly relevant to showing the officer why you're eligible for asylum, then this is your chance to raise it. Okay, so what kind of things then are directly relevant to you winning asylum? Well, remember, in an asylum case, there's two main things the officer is looking at. They're looking at persecution and they're looking at nexus. The first thing, persecution, is asking, have you been harmed in a way that is so severe that it counts as persecution, that it rises to the level of persecution? And then also related, forward looking to the future, is there something that makes the officer believe that you're likely to be harmed in the future and that harm is going to be so severe that it constitutes persecution? That's the persecution question. The other one is nexus, which is, okay, this harm, this persecution, is it motivated, at least in significant part, by the fact that you possess one of the 5 protected characteristics under U.S. asylum law: race, religion, nationality, something called membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. You've got to either possess one of those, or the persecutors, the bad guys, have to think that you possess it. They have to impute possession of it to you. And that's got to be one of the main reasons that they're targeting you for harm. Okay. So if during your asylum interview, you did not get the chance to address something that shows the officer, yeah, look, I've been harmed and what happened to me was really bad. Or, yeah, no, I'm going to be harmed in the future. It's really going to happen because, look, there's all these threats against me. And even recently, this other threat came. So these bad guys, they're still serious about wanting to hurt me. Okay. Or if there's some circumstance that shows why they did this to you, why they targeted you. For example, maybe there was an incident where in a phone call, the bad guy said to you, just take an example, but you leftists, you political leftists, you guys think you know everything, but we're going to stomp you and we're going to show you how it really works. Well, that's relevant because it shows that it's your political opinion, or at least one that they think you have, that is one of the things that's causing them to want to harm you. So that goes to nexus. So let's say that during the interview, just because of the way it works out, that call didn't come up, or at least that thing that they said, you didn't have a chance to talk about it because the officer didn't ask you, or the way they asked the questions didn't allow you to get it out, or they cut you off maybe and moved on. Well, that's a scenario where you would say at the end, when the officer says, anything else? You could say, actually, yes, officer, there was this one phone call that I got that we haven't talked about yet that I think might be of interest to you. And the officer will say, tell me about it. And you'll say, well, and you'll explain in about 3 sentences very short. You want to keep this short. You want to explain what was said that has to do, in our example here, with showing that helps show what it was about you that is causing them to want to hurt you. Okay. So the idea is this: you don't want to drone on, you don't want to talk about things that don't have to do with why you're eligible for asylum. But if you didn't get the chance to tell the officer something during the rest of the interview before that shows them that you've been harmed really badly, you're likely to be harmed really badly, and why it is that you're being targeted for harm, then this is your chance to say it. Okay, this is your chance to bring it up. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes, someone's been harmed or been through a whole lot. They've been through a bunch of stuff and they don't get the chance to talk about it, about all of it. And so, this could be a chance to say, in that example, well, let's say you've been harmed, you've been attacked 10 times. And during the interview, you talk about 3 or 4, like say 4 of those incidents. At this stage where the officer says, anything else you want to discuss? You could say, well, officer, we discussed 4 of the times that I was harmed. I've been harmed 6 additional times. Would you like to hear about any of those? And then the officer can decide, well, maybe, or tell me about the worst one of those other 6. Or they might just say, nope, I've heard enough, because sometimes they don't need to hear it all. If they pass a certain point where they know, okay, you've been harmed sufficiently severely for it to count as persecution, and I already know based on the circumstances and the words that the persecutors used that it was because of the fact that you possessed one of the protected grounds, one of the protected characteristics, they don't need to hear all the rest, and they'll just tell you that. Okay, but that's an example of something that you might want to say. Oh, officer, there were some other threatening phone calls that we didn't have a chance to talk about yet today. Would you like to hear more about those? So use some discretion at the end there, and only try to answer this question with something of substance where you're actually going to be talking, if you think it's necessary to help show the officer that you qualify for asylum, because it helps to show them that you've been harmed in a way that's so bad it counts as persecution, or that you're likely to be harmed in a way so bad that it counts as persecution, or that it shows them what the reason is. Okay, that it's because of the fact of your race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. Okay, otherwise, if you've already covered all that stuff, it's completely fine, and probably even the best case scenario to be able to say, nothing to add. No, officer, nothing further. Okay? Don't be afraid to say that. It's perfectly fine. And usually the officer's going, oh, thank God. Good. All right, I don't have to type as much now. We can finish this up. Okay? So that's what I wanted to say about that. Let's turn to some questions. So we got lots of questions both on YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. So I'm going to address a few of these. I don't have a whole lot of time today, so I might not be able to get to all of them because there's a lot, but I want to try to get to some of them, okay? By the way, for those of you who joined us late, I'm Brian Manning, and I'm a political asylum lawyer. My law firm's called Manning Asylum Law. It's based in Texas, but we help people all over the country to secure their future in the United States through asylum. I used to be an asylum officer with the government. And before that, I was a diplomat, and I did some of the visa work. And many of you have been through that, through the visa process. So I've seen this stuff from some unique perspectives, and that's the experience that I draw on to add value to my clients' cases. And by the way, if you want to talk with me, if you want to get a consultation with me where we can talk about your asylum case, give us a call on Facebook and YouTube. You're going to see the number up above my head. You're not seeing it on TikTok, but it's 713-909-0401. Again, it's 713-909-0401. On TikTok, it's in my bio if you click on my name to go to my bio. And so, yeah, give us a call if you want to set up a consultation to see if we might be able to help you. All right, let's turn to some questions. Let's take, I just wanted to see what Eduardo had to say. Eduardo says, hey, Brian, I have to say your tutorials have helped me a lot with my personal statement in preparation for my interview that one day I will get. Originally from Venezuela and living in the USA. Thank you, Eduardo. Yeah, if you want some help with how to draft your declaration or your personal statement that you submit with your asylum application, go check out my YouTube page. In the English, if you're not on there now, the English language YouTube page is called Manning Asylum Law. but I've got it in Spanish too. It's called Asilo para Venezolanos in Estados Unidos. If you want to see it in Spanish, much of the same stuff. Some of it's the same. There's some additional stuff though that's specific to Venezuelans. It's not just for Venezuelans, but I have a lot of Venezuelan clients. I help a lot of Venezuelans, so there's some stuff that's specific there to Venezuelans. But thank you for that, Eduardo, for the kind words. I appreciate that. I'm glad it's been helpful to you. Let's see. Next question. Hey, Moody Kong, it was good talking to you the other day. I want to highlight this question just to tell you, unfortunately, I can't answer this kind of question. So he's asking about student status with pending asylum. And it says, when I file tax, should I choose either tax resident or non-tax resident? I have no idea. And this is the reason that I chose a question to show, to which I have no clue how to answer, is to illustrate an important point that you need to talk to a tax expert. Okay, talk to a certified public accountant, CPA, or a tax lawyer for this kind of question, or tax advisor. There may be some immigration lawyers that will give you an answer to this, but I wouldn't trust it. I would go to a tax expert. So this is an important point. I do asylum. That's all I do. I don't do family-based immigration. I don't do student visas. I don't do investment, employment-based visas or immigration. I just do asylum. And I recommend that you work with a lawyer who focuses on the kind of problem that you need solved. Okay. Immigration law is too complex, in my opinion, to dabble in the different areas of immigration law. It changes too much. Asylum law, or at least the policies and how the government treats it, have been changing so much the last few years that I think you really need to work with an asylum lawyer, not an immigration lawyer who does all kinds of immigration, or who does immigration law, even worse, and also criminal law or family law. Don't do that. Okay. You're not getting someone who is dialed in and focused and constantly reading about, constantly talking and thinking about this specific area of law where you need help. That's what you want to do. So, when you have a heart condition, you don't go see a neurosurgeon, or someone who focuses on the brain or nervous system. You want to go to a heart doctor, a cardiologist. You want to go to the person who focuses on the thing that you do, a specialist. Okay. All right. This is a good question. Actually, we'll come back to YouTube. I got to go in like 7 minutes, but let me take one from TikTok. All right. So this one says, on TikTok, we have a question from Biran or Birain 36. It says, I filed for asylum after the 1 year filing deadline because I have a special needs child with life treatment. Okay. So this brings up the 1 year filing deadline. Generally, you got to apply for asylum in your first year in the United States. If you don't do that, then they can reject your application because you didn't apply in 1 year. There's two categories of exceptions, two categories of excuses where you can file later and it'll be okay. One of them is called extraordinary circumstances. That's one of the categories. And you can maybe rely on a range of things for this that count as an extraordinary circumstance that will excuse your late filing and make it okay. Anything that makes it really, really, really hard for you to file during your first year, such that we just can't say, oh, that's it's just you should have gotten it done. Why didn't you get it done? If there's something really hard going on in your life, that may count as an extraordinary circumstance. If it was really affecting your life. So, for example, in the context of your question, where you said you had a special needs child that had required a lot of treatment, maybe if during your first year in the United States, your life was like consumed by getting this child the treatment they needed, like maybe you were constantly at the hospital with them, constantly trying to arrange healthcare and education, and maybe that even wore you down to the point where you couldn't really function. You couldn't think of anything else. You started to get maybe even depressed. Basically, if your circumstances were so difficult such that it would not be fair to have expected you to go learn about how to apply for asylum and get that done, then this could be a winning excuse. It could be an exception to the 1 year filing deadline, and excuse your late filing. Okay. But it's a really fact dependent analysis. That means that the asylum officer is going to look at tons of different facts around this question to determine whether, okay, that counts as a good excuse. I'll give you that one or not. And let me give you a tip. This is the kind of thing that you do want a lawyer to help you to explain, okay, to help you understand what kind of facts are relevant and to help you explain them and frame them in a way that will be easy for the officer to see why, yes, taken together, all of this stuff that does count as an extraordinary circumstance, and therefore you can file the asylum application late and have it still be okay. All right. All right. So let's go to YouTube, where David says, is applying for asylum in another country and then leaving that country before you get the results, does that count as firm resettlement? Also, what about a 1-year temporary humanitarian card from Mexico? All right. So he's asking about firm resettlement, which is where if after leaving the country where you fear being persecuted or you've been persecuted, but before coming to the United States, if you go to another country where you have permanent residence, or they give you an offer to get permanent residence while you're physically in that country, then you can't get asylum in the United States. You are barred by something called the firm resettlement bar. So to answer your question, David, about, well, what if you applied for asylum in a third country, like on the way to the United States? No, that will not bar you. That will not trigger the firm resettlement bar. Okay, you have to either, for the firm resettlement bar to apply to you and keep you from getting asylum, you have to either have permanent residence or have what they call an offer to get it. And just applying for it without getting a decision will not count as having it or having an offer for it. Okay, so that's good news for you. On the second part of 1-year temporary humanitarian card from Mexico, the way that you've described it makes it sound like it should not count as permanent residence. Sounds like it's not permanent. Okay, but that's a tricky question. The asylum officer is going to analyze Mexican immigration law to try to decide whether what you have was in fact permanent or not, whether that card actually does give permanent residence. Sometimes the officer will decide that it is permanent, even if it's not called permanent residence. Like if it can be renewed indefinitely, if you could just go back every year and keep renewing it, and it's pretty easy to do so, and there's no set limit on how many times you can do that. And if you have other certain benefits or other things that make it look like you are there permanently, you're resettled, then in that case, they might say, oh, this is permanent residence, even though it's not called that. That happens sometimes. This is another fact-specific analysis where you're going to need to really understand what exactly you had in Mexico and to be able to articulate why it's not permanent. Okay, to be able to point to the officer to the law, the Mexican law, that shows how this works, or the policies of their foreign ministry probably, or maybe their interior ministry that manages this, and show them, look, this is why it's not permanent. It's not permanent. Okay. So that's what you got to be prepared to do. And I think you should have a lawyer help you with that. Okay, I got to go in a couple minutes, but let me got a bunch of questions on TikTok. So let me take a couple of those. All right. So, okay, thank you. So Birain, whose question I asked earlier, says, I will book an appointment tomorrow online. Thank you. Yeah. If you want to get a consultation with me to talk in detail about your situation, call me 713-909-0401. Again, 713-909-0401. Or go to my website. You can it's manningasylumlaw.com, or you can just Google Manning Asylum Law. And on my website, you can make the appointment. You can do it online without needing to call anyone. Okay. So I would love to talk to you. So I'm glad that you're going to do that. Thank you. Okay. This is interesting. So Gustavo says, my asylum got denied by an asylum officer and was sent to court. I think they made a mistake. I'd like to send a reconsideration. Any thoughts? I know you don't recommend a reconsideration, but I really think they made a mistake. Thanks for your time. So yeah, in one of my lives the other day, I was talking about this, about how I had success with a motion for reconsideration, which is kind of like an appeal to the asylum office. at the asylum office, where you write a letter to the director and you explain why they messed up, why they committed egregious error, really bad error, and it rarely works. We made it work the other day, but it rarely. It's super hard to do. I think it's even harder to do when your case has been referred to the immigration court as compared to a scenario where you get a final denial when you still have legal status and the asylum office makes the negative decision and they just deny it. It's not referred to the court, but rather just deny it. I think it's a little bit easier then, because a referral involves more effort for the asylum office because they have to get with ICE, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security that does the deportations, and they have to work together to terminate the notice to appear, to terminate the court proceedings, which is like, it's more effort for them. So they're less likely to do it. But yeah, I mean, you can, Gustavo, you can try, you write a motion for reconsideration address it to the director of the asylum office. If you don't know that person's name, and you can't find it by Googling, you can just say to the director, and you got to explain why they're wrong. Okay. It's probably, I mean, there's really nothing to lose in doing it. Like it's not going to hurt you. It's not going to hurt your case in immigration court or make the judge or anyone mad at you. So there's no real downside. It's just the chances for success are so small that it's like, it might not be worth your time to deal with it. But, it's not going to hurt. You'd probably have a better chance if you hired a lawyer, but, there's no harm in trying, right? So let's see. I've seen this question before, so I want to address it. Nick Sen says, is there any difference between decision pending or application pending after an asylum interview? How long is USCIS usually taking to give decisions? So yeah, so this question about if you Google USCIS case status and you put in your receipt number, you can see like what the status of your case is. And sometimes it'll say this after the interview, it'll say decision pending, and sometimes it'll say application pending. So Nick's asking like, what's the difference? I don't know. I don't think there is one. You got to understand that system, that case status system for USCIS is not that helpful. Okay. There are mistakes all the time. And I do not necessarily think that they purposefully made this distinction between those two things that you're talking about, to where it really, like, I don't think the distinction is meaningful. So basically don't read anything into it and don't worry about it. It will not help you to understand where things are to try to get to the bottom of this. So like, I know it's going to be hard, but just don't worry about it. Okay. How long is it taking them to make decisions? Okay. So they try to make that their goal is to mail a decision out within 20 days of the interview. That's their goal. And like their metric that they're trying to measure that against is the goal they've set is they want to try to meet that goal of 20 days with 70% of all interviews they do. So 70% of cases, they're saying, hey, we're going to send it out in 20 days, the decision. I don't think that's well, actually, they said it did happen. They said they did it since like June of 2021 till maybe February. They said they achieved that. I find that very surprising. Just anecdotally, in my experience, my law firm's experience, that does not happen. Most cases take several weeks, more than 20 days, like 4 or 5 weeks. Many of them take much longer. So the answer is there's no way to know how long it's going to take. It might take just 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, but there's a good chance it's going to take more. Okay. All right. Yep. That's it. I gotta go. Call me if you want to get a consultation, or go to my, maybe even easier still, quicker still, just go to my website, manningasylumlaw.com, and you'll see a link. I think it's in the upper right hand corner for schedule an asylum strategy session. That's what I call a consultation, where we're going to talk about your case. I'm going to tell you what I think about it, whether I think I can help you, and if so, I'll tell you exactly what we could do to strengthen your case and to put a great case together for you. Whether you are in the asylum office or your case is pending with an immigration court, we help people in both those contexts, and we help people all over the country. Okay. We are in Texas, but we help people all over California, Florida, Illinois, New York, and all the places in between. So that's it. Got to go. Have a good night, and feel free to keep leaving questions in the comments. And I look forward to seeing you again very soon. And it's an honor to support you in your asylum journey. So